What is happening at this moment in the Ukraine war? We're being joined by Mr. Maximilian Hess, who is a Central Asia Fellow at the Foreign Policy Research Institute and author of Economic War, Ukraine and Global Conflict. He's joining us in this broadcast. Mr. Hess, let me in fact start off by asking you this. At this moment, Volodymyr Zelensky is looking for more support from his Western allies. But the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has said something very interesting. She said that she wants to ensure that Ukraine is in a better position to negotiate, and negotiations do not necessarily mean surrender. Do you think there is a nudge on the part of the European allies of Ukraine that Ukraine should now perhaps look at negotiating, in a best possible way that is possible? What's your reading on this?
Thank you for having me, firstly. And in response to your question, I think that Meloni is really speaking more to within European politics. There's, of course, a lot of uncertainty, as you and your colleague mentioned, around the future of the U.S. election and whether Donald Trump will significantly ratchet down support if he is elected on the 5th of November, following the inauguration in January. But really, this conflict is probably, sadly, is about as far away from its end as it is from its beginning. The internal dynamics within Europe over how to respond going forward, how to continue to fund Ukraine, particularly if the United States is less willing to do so under a Trump presidency, are key questions. But we did see the European Union agree last month to advance its own plan to use these frozen Russian assets to create a new large financing mechanism for the EU, for Ukraine, apologies. And while initially it had been structured as 50-50 between the US and Europe, the Europeans have already gone and added another 10 billion into their envisaged support there, recognizing that they need to be doing more. So Meloni speaking within that European debate about how to position this going forward and to her own domestic audiences, but the idea that Putin is willing to negotiate anytime soon, sadly, is still very unrealistic. Yeah,
that's interesting. Now, Giorgia Meloni says negotiations do not mean surrender, but at the same time, Volodymyr Zelensky says that he wants to see an end to this war in 2025. Now, we're heading into election season in the United States of America. There'll be a different president in the White House, and we do not know if they would back the Ukrainian war effort in the manner that Joe Biden has been doing. Do you think at this moment the Ukrainian defense strategy against the Russians is on some pretty thin ice, considering that a lot depends on what happens in the American elections for the Ukrainians to depend and rely on American aid?
Certainly. I don't think the Ukrainians are on thin ice. I personally think that Donald Trump is horribly unfit to be president and is a criminal awaiting sentencing. And I hope that the Americans will make the right decision there. But that being said, I don't think he wants to be associated with a major loss for the Ukrainians. I think Donald Trump would try to push the Ukrainians to some kind of ceasefire. That under that kind of Trump presidency would almost certainly be an invitation for Putin to rebuild his army, get sanctions relief, and then eventually start another war. What ceasefire comes and does happen in the future, which, as I said, I'm not necessarily confident is something that is realistic, despite how much attention it has gotten recently, very much has to be with the view towards what happens thereafter and how are the two sides positioned going forward from there.
All right, we'll have to leave there. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Hess, for joining us and getting us that perspective there.
Thank you so much.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.